Hello and welcome to the Navel Gaze, a podcast about autosexuality. My name is Tolly Botts. I'm joined with my co-host Aaron Terrell, and today we have a special guest from the YouTube underworld. This is McMad. McMad, also known as Oliver. Um, McMad is a YouTube creator. I'll let you kind of introduce yourself a little bit beyond that, but the way that the three of us met was I stumbled across a comment on Aaron's Twitter. And it was from McMad asking about Aaron's theory on sort of like the prevalence of HSTS among females and like what typical kind of like trans female or FTM relationships look like. And I don't think Aaron had seen the comment yet. And so I just like responded for Aaron. I was like, I know Aaron's answer to this. And yeah, from there, I think I recommended you the channel, and then you watched a bunch of videos and you had some thoughts. So we're here to kind of hear your thoughts, talk about what you think about our theory, and just get to know you a little bit too. Most of the people that we've had on the show have been male, MTFs or detransitioners. I guess we've had like a couple non-transitioners, but we don't really get the FTM perspective very often, other than, from our dear leader, Aaron, over here. So this is exciting for me and hopefully for our audience too, to just get kind of another perspective. So welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. So where did you want to start, I guess?
You could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then typically we're interested in like hearing your gender journey.
Gender journey.
Just say it as like possible, like
cool.
Your experience with dysphoria, your experience with the decision to transition. You said that you were like you had a trans med phase, so kind of like how your conception of dysphoria and trans identity, how that's kind of changed and where you're at now.
Cool. Well, I guess things are like a little bit complicated for me. When I was listening to you guys' episodes, I definitely like the direction you guys are going with the theory. I more or less would say I agree with it. The part where I get like a little tripped up, I guess, with myself is that I actually don't really know where to place myself on any kind of like HSTS, AAP, any of that. Most confidently, I can say I'm bisexual for sure. But like the feelings I've had about like my gender go back so far, and I had like a bit of a unique life experience because I was Catholic and homeschooled, and my mom is not originally from this country. So there's a few things that like, as far as socially, there's like a little bit of like an anomaly there. So it's harder for me to know, like, because obviously there is some like social aspect to gender and all that, and I just had like a very different relationship with that, Yeah. So I think like initially when I was a really little kid, I definitely was into like princesses and stuff. I did wear dresses. Like my grandmother used to sew us little dresses and stuff. I always liked to wear them. I know that, trans people tend to like rewrite their past. So I'm going to try not to do that. I can't always tell if it's like, I don't remember if it was because it made me feel like especially feminine or like pretty, or if it was just very comfortable because we're in North Carolina and the summers get really hot. It's really nice to have like a flowy skirt and all that. But I think there was like some confusion early on because like there were times where I wanted to play like the prince instead of the princess, and it always like was weird to want to do that because like, well, I'm a girl. Girls are supposed to do girl things type thing, I want to say at a certain point, I think I gave myself like a justification for having to be a boy, which was that in my like head at the time, I think I might have been like 9, 10, 11, 12, like in that range. I was like, well, I'm the oldest in my family. I have 5 siblings, so I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I'm the oldest in my family. And the 2 oldest friends that I have in their families are both boys, and they have to be like a certain person and all that. And well, I should be that kind of person too for my family, right? So I guess I have to be a boy. And it made no sense. There was no logic there, really. I think really I just wanted to like be a boy, and I was trying to find like a reasoning. But I remember like distinctly like thinking to myself, like, I'm going to hold myself to male standards instead of female standards. So if a boy's not supposed to cry, I'm not going to cry. If a boy's supposed to be strong, I'm going to try and be strong. which became a little difficult when I hit puberty because like physical changes really make it impossible for you to keep up with boys. I know like before that happened, like there was a couple other like experiences where I think I was 10 years old. I got my first really short haircut, like really, really short. And I really liked the fact that I looked male. Like I had a kid ask me once, like, why are you wearing girl shoes? And when I told him it was because I was a girl, he was like, no, you're not. Like he just wouldn't, he called bullshit. Like, you know what I mean? There was another experience. And I don't know if this guy was just like pulling my leg or whatever, but he like straight up was like, wait a second, you're a girl, you're ugly. And it didn't even really like bother me. I was just kind of like, well, guess now you know. I don't know. You know what I mean? So there was definitely like from a pretty early age, like I don't think I had hit puberty yet when I started to like mess around with that, which kind of goes against like the accounting I just gave you kind of goes against like the theories they have where it's like it's either very early in childhood or it's puberty. But it seems like for me, it was like middle range of childhood. Things started to kind of like pop up.
Yeah.
Then in high school, I definitely was like butch. Like I would look at pictures of masculine women and everything. I wanted to be like that way. You know, I wanted to look, I don't know if you've ever seen that video that Ruby Rose did. It was called Break Free. It was basically, she goes from looking very, very feminine to doing the whole thing. And then by the end, she's got a strap and everything. And she's totally masculine. I didn't realize that was possible before that video. Like that was the first time I saw like, wait a second, I can just literally cut my hair and do the things that I like dreamed of doing as a kid. Like I used to write stories. There's like one character I had where her whole thing was she dresses as a boy to go undercover and like has to be like a guy for like quite a big part of the story. So there's always been that element for me of like close to the line of like masculine, if not androgyny, right? The times where I tried
preference for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was like much more comfortable. I never felt like I had to hold back or like have a filter on if I was around guys. I know in high school I definitely had more male friends than female friends. I want to say, but I did still have female friends. It was just like there felt like there was a barrier there between me and them, where it's like I'm like maybe gay best friend vibes kind of thing. At least on my end. I don't know if they felt that way. But I yeah, that was definitely like a real thing that happened for high school and all that. I definitely bounced between trying to be feminine and then it not working out and then going back to masculine. That was like a trend for me. Was like I would try and like give up my old ways and embrace my femininity and all that, and it just was like it didn't work. The dysphoria, I never really clocked it as like dysphoria for the longest time. Like a lot of trans women that I hear talk about dysphoria, they're like, it's this visceral like body horror experience where like, you know, your voice is deepening, you're getting taller, and it's like what's happening, make it stop. And for me, I just I don't remember feeling very much anything towards my body when I was like hitting puberty. Aaron, I know you mentioned that like periods for you weren't like a big deal, and it was kind of the same for me, where it's just like ovulating was actually the worst part because that's when my emotions would go crazy and it was like unbearable. Then my testosterone legitimately was the best mood stabilizer I'd ever been on. I've not had any emotional problems since I started it. It was actually crazy. Because beforehand, like PMS and everything would make that like very, very difficult. I would go to like near suicide levels of ideation and whatever. Sometimes just because like, I guess the hormones just in my body were not doing their job or something. But
sounds
like,
almost like PMDD.
That's what people were telling me too. And there's an added weirdness to it because family member of mine has PCOS. And I've like, you know, they have like the digit ratios for like fingers and that kind of thing for trans men. I've looked that up. I've looked at it for myself, and it does seem to be the case that I might have gotten like more testosterone in utero. It just makes it very confusing that I'm the only one with dysphoria. You know what I mean? So there's like an added level of like strange. I know like, I don't know what my mom has exactly either, but it's their hormone issues seem to be a trend in my family. So there's like that as well. So I guess I'm like a little bit all over the place, but
okay.
Trying to think. I did write some notes down. Oh yeah. Puberty and periods and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, into kind of dysphoria for you.
Yeah, so like breasts weren't like that big of a deal. I think when I first started getting them, I think I thought they were kind of weird looking on me. Like they, when they first start developing, it's just like, this is strange, and then eventually you have to start wearing bras. And that was more annoying than anything. I put off wearing them for as long as I could because it was like uncomfortable. I know, like, I got pissed as a kid when I realized girls could not walk around with their shirts off. I had these dolls. They were like little felt dolls, but they were like flat chested. And one of them, like, especially when she wasn't wearing a shirt or whatever, the little thing looked kind of masculine, and I liked that, and she would always be like out chopping wood or doing like masculine activities. And then at one point, my sister told me, like, wait, she has to be wearing a shirt. You can't be a girl and not wear a shirt. And I got pissed. Like, I was so mad. Like, what the fuck do you mean? I can't, like, my doll can't wear like my doll has to wear a shirt. What do you mean I have to wear a shirt when I grow up? Like, that's insane to me. It felt so unfair. I was like really upset about that. I remember that distinctly. But yeah, then like, I kind of got used to the idea of like trying to make myself as flat chested as possible, for sure. I think when I watched like Les Mis at one point, like Les Miserables, the play, there's that character that she like binds her chest to go undercover and like meet her lover in battle or something like that. Stuff like that. Movies like Mulan definitely like resonated with me on that level too, of just like women dressing as men and then like doing male gender role stuff. That was always something that I really liked. I think even to this day, I kind of feel that way at times, where it's like I'm going undercover or I'm like hiding something to just make socializing in life a little bit easier. Trying to think what else. When I got to college, I tried to feminize quite a bit more. I think dating was suddenly on the table for me, and I was like, well, to get a male partner, to being feminine is like the easiest thing. You know what I mean? My first relationship was not great. It was traumatizing, like rapey, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't very awesome at all. I think part of it was I was like Catholic, homeschooled, very sheltered. I didn't go to public school at all, like homeschool all the way through high school. And then I went to community college. That was my first experience, like being kind of like in a public school setting type thing. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I want to do what I'm supposed to be doing, which as a girl, I'm supposed to, find a nice Catholic husband, get married and all that. Didn't really want any of that really. But I'm very much programmed. Like, I don't know if I have autism or not. I haven't gotten diagnosed. I do have ADHD. I haven't gotten checked for autism yet, but having a rule system to kind of follow does work for me. So like, okay, well, if I'm a female and I'm a woman and I'm Catholic and all that, well, here's XYZ list of instructions of what I should be doing as that kind of person, right? So I kind of like forced myself to try and like the relationship for a year and a half. Didn't work out. Had a epic crash out in 2018. That was probably like the lowest point in my life, or at least one of the lowest points in my life. And after that, it was just like a whole lot of running away. So I like came out to myself as like a lesbian after my first relationship. And there is something to that that isn't just rooted in trauma. I did initially seek out like only material of women. Like, I had no interest in the male body at all. I was never curious as to like how the dick worked or anything like that. I never had an interest in like having sex with men. If I did have a connection with somebody, it was a woman. But again, being homeschooled and all that, the idea of like sex before marriage or anything like that, even attraction was like such a bad thing. Like, we didn't talk about sex or anything like that. So hard to kind of parse through all that. But I know for a fact, like, I got to college and after my first relationship, I realized, hey, part of the problems with that relationship were probably that I wasn't attracted to this guy. That was like a big hang up in the entire relationship. And it was because I liked women, so I went with that for a while. And then like I slowly started to realize I had like some attractions to men. Didn't really like it at all, repressed it as much as I could. Especially at the time I was working in a kitchen, like back of house kitchen, fry cook, that kind of thing. I was the only female and I was also the youngest there. And so I was a little bit scared about them knowing that I like guys, because I didn't know if that was going to signal to them that they had a chance now. You know what I mean? So I would say that I think like some of my expression of masculinity has been somewhat protective of like, if people know I'm a girl, that might open me up to like sexual advances and stuff. And I don't like that, I like advances on my terms, not on other people's terms. But it also felt like, and this is going to sound like really weird. I'm sure there's some gay guys that are going to get upset by this, but like it did feel gayer for me to admit that I like guys than I like girls. Like it was very easy for me to acknowledge, like, I like women, that was fine. Acknowledging that I like guys was like a little bit weirder because I did really, even at that time, I didn't notice it. I didn't like recognize it in myself, but I did identify, if not as a man, at least very strongly with men. So it was very strange to like have to admit that. And eventually I embraced my bisexuality when I realized that women were not very, you couldn't easily hook up with them, which at the time was always all I was interested in. I had commitment issues or whatever. I just wanted to hook up with women and that's it. Women don't really like that kind of thing, at least not on lesbian dating apps. So I just started hooking up with men because it was really convenient. Like you do not have to try hard at all for that to happen. So like that worked out for a while. Kind of had to admit I was bisexual at that point, but like, I think after that, like it was just, there was a lull. I just kind of did my thing for a while. I still look pretty butch and all that. Would still get mistaken as a boy, on and off. And then I met my partner, and it was actually after that I transitioned. So we were together for about a year. And I did the thing that I had done with my previous partners, which was, if I feel like there's a chance we're going to start dating, this was because of my first relationship, I would go all feminine, all out, so I would dress myself up and everything, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do to please the partner. And that kind of comes from the fact that like, my first boyfriend basically point blank told me nobody's going to want you if you dress like a boy. Right. Very ironic. Like I don't think something has aged worse in its life, because here I am now. But the dysphoria, I think, got a little worse when I started dating somebody else, because now there was like another person constantly in my life that saw me more intimately than anybody else really had seen me before. And you can very easily put up a front when you're hooking up with people, but when you're when you're in a like long-term relationship, all masks kind of drop eventually, and you have to deal with the real person on the other end. And I just kept like having these moments of like, just severe like panic or concern about like who I was. And it was like, I would just have these lapses in identity where it was like, I had no idea who I was, period. Not man, woman, introvert, extrovert, like anything about myself. It was like, it was impossible for me to say anything like, or know anything about myself. And this kept happening until my partner actually was the one who said, you keep talking about this gender stuff. Like, why don't you just give it a shot, see what happens? And at the very least, at the very worst, like it doesn't work out and you just go back to the way things were. But if things do work out, like, wouldn't it be worth trying? So I said, okay, I'll try. And then it took some time. It was very, very scary. Like I would have like panic attacks about like, am I doing the right thing? Is this like the right thing to do? Because coming from a conservative background, I was being the delusional one now, but it worked out. It actually worked out amazingly. And I don't think I've, how do I put it? I've never regretted something less. That's what I'm trying to say. Like it legitimately has provided so much benefit to me. Doesn't really matter. Like I still go back and forth in my mind to this day sometimes of like, is this the right thing for me to be doing? But sheerly going by how beneficial testosterone has been for me, I just could never go back. Like, I don't really care how people even see me or view me. Like I prefer being seen as a man and all that. But if people have to like settle for me just being like a masculinized female or whatever, I'm like, as long as I can keep my testosterone, I don't really care. You know what I mean? I want to get top surgery down the line so I can finally be shirtless. But other than that, like the need for me to be on T is like, I think it's at this point, it has surpassed like being trans. It feels like it legitimately helps me in so many other ways, But yeah, sorry, I've been monologuing now. I hope that all made sense, but yeah.
It did.
Yeah. Great.
Okay,
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm curious. You said that like in high school or around, because you were homeschooled. I was also homeschooled. So
Nice.
like high school age. Yeah, you know what that means.
Yeah.
But you're saying that you were butch. Then you mean just aesthetically, or it seems like you were probably quite sheltered, didn't really have as we tend to be when we're homeschooled.
Yeah.
But so like dating girls at the time, like was like butch lesbian your identity, or retrospectively are you saying I was butch because that was the style that I presented myself in?
I would definitely say retrospectively. I don't think I really knew what the term butch was at the time. I wasn't dating girls back then, mainly because I wasn't dating anybody back then. I didn't date in high school. I think my first boyfriend was in college, and then I had like some kind of relationship between that guy and the guy I'm with now. So I've really only dated like 3 people. But yeah, I mean, if I had been in a more open-minded, progressive household, I probably would have been dating women sooner. But there's really no way for me to concretely say either or.
Fair.
But yeah.
That was really interesting. Thank you for running us through that.
Yeah.
Are you? Well, I was gonna say, are you cool with it? I'm just gonna assume that you're open to all types of poking and prodding in this conversation.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love being studied. So you're good.
Okay, cool. And it seems like, just again, even from the question that you posed on Twitter that like brought us all to this conversation, like you're interested in the sexology stuff, and sort of in like Blanchard's typology. And so my first impression is just like, whether or not AAP fits for you, you're not HSDS, because that is sort of a very specific track, and your bisexuality essentially negates that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you're not lying about your bisexuality. You're trying to obfuscate that. But yeah, so like it's not a clear-cut HSTS case, for whatever that means. And like you said, there are like
I still don't think HSTS females exist, for the record.
We've at least yet to see a super convincing case.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's interesting. I guess I have some questions, and this is like a little personal, so you don't have to answer. But a lot of what we talk about, especially with sort of like sexuality potentially being kind of central to this gender identity, for lack of better words, for like the way that people see themselves, for dysphoric people. You said that being with your partner, kind of like in a relationship, is kind of when the dysphoria was heightened. And that makes sense to me, because now there's, like you said, there's kind of someone else that's seeing you vulnerable all the time. And the way that Aaron and I have framed it often is there's like this comparison suddenly, right? It's like, yeah, you're naked with the partner all the time, and you're getting this like this real contrast or not contrast of your bodies in that really visceral way. So I guess part of my question is like, what was like, if you could just kind of describe that feeling, like what kind of things were distressing about it. And then with regards to sex and sexual relationships, do you feel like you take a more stereotypically masculine or feminine role typically, or one that you're more comfortable being in?
So I guess like to answer the first part about like what the dysphoria felt like, I think dysphoria for me has always been like kind of like an ew feeling. It was just kind of like, ugh, like I look in the mirror and it's just like, soft and curvy, and I wasn't as in shape back then as I am now. So it was just kind of like an ew feeling, which I think, if you feel like that about yourself, like in a sexual sense, like that's a total turnoff. And so I think I don't know exactly what started it. I remember like my partner's like extremely open-minded. He's had more experience than even I have had in like the sexual realm and everything like that. But like, God, I'm trying to remember what started it. I remember looking at like pictures of guys on like Pinterest or whatever. And I was kind of like trying to figure out what I was feeling, because I was like, I don't feel attraction to these guys really. It's kind of like the, you guys are talking about like the envy and desire thing. I don't know which one exactly it was, but it was just definitely like an aha moment when I realized like, I think I want to look like these guys. And that's why I'm not feeling that like turn on feeling. It's more like this is generally more what I wanted to look like at the time. Now my desire of like what I want to look like has kind of changed since then. Back then it was much more like, twink with long hair. And now I'm, I've got a buzz cut and I like being more muscular and stuff, and I'm fine with that. But like definitely at that time there was like I want to look like that more. And I guess again, like it was one of those things coming out of 2019 and everything. I had already I'd kind of undergone like a progressive transformation. I was like very conservative and then saw the world, experienced more, and became more open-minded. So it's one of those things where I want to say that if I had been again in a more open-minded household, I would have made that connection sooner. But with everything like having to be repressed during that stage, like I don't know if it just came out later or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But,
right. Well, and engaging in sexual relationships and romantic relationships earlier might have made that come out sooner.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just curious about when you're thinking about like looking at yourself and feeling like, or just not feeling sexy or whatever. Could like, so you're starting to think, well, maybe if I, were more male, looked male, like realizing that's, you would feel better about yourself with that result. But I'm wondering if, like, do you think if you had thought back, what if I was just like a sexier woman? Like, would that have removed the ooh feeling, or would it still be ooh simply by being female?
So I guess I can speak on that a little bit because I did try to embrace femininity quite a few times, and I can really only say it really seemed to just heighten that you feeling. Like like I would wear like the summer skirts or like the shorter pants and crop tops or whatever, and it was just like I feel ridiculous, I feel like I'm gonna burst out of these things even if they are like my size and everything. I always felt gross and weird, you know what I mean? Makeup just felt like clown makeup after a while. Like initially it was like fun to mess around with, but then after a while it was just like, this is like, it itches, it doesn't feel good, like everything about it sucks, on a sensory level and an identity level, it just sucks. So even if I did detransition, I would still be a tomboy. Like
and I think the way you describe it too, it reminds me of this trans woman that I retweeted like yesterday or something, who was sort of saying a similar thing. She's an autogynephile, and she was saying that basically the autogynephilia, like chasing after the desire to look like a woman, was sort of secondary to her, and her primary motivation was this autoandrophobia, or like ew at her own male body. And she put it in a way that I think that's kind of easy to understand and like very palatable. Like, I don't feel good in my own body. People can kind of get that. But she said it in a way that I appreciated because it kind of tied it into the sexuality thing, which was like, I could just pick up the tweet right now instead of me trying to remember it. But it was like basically like she was trying to avoid being kind of unattracted, right? It was like, like the sort of, like the unattractive. She was unattracted to herself in that state, in the male state, right? So that's what she was sort of running from. And I'm hearing like a similar thing. And again, it's hard. Where's the line? And I'm wary to like over sexualize things or to project this into other people. But it does seem like these things are at least related because we are, sexual beings, right? And that it's not just like right, I wish I looked better, I don't feel good about myself, generalized low self-esteem. It's like, it's like an ew. It's like, this doesn't look right. I'm not, this isn't sexy. And then, like you said, it's hard to then get into a sexy and turned on mindset. And this is something that Aaron and I kind of talked about at the beginning of the series. That's stuff that I talked about with my wife when we were going. My wife is like a desister, for lack of better terms, basically. But it's like when it came down to it, it's like she can't feel sexy or like be in any like type of aroused state with the reality of her body. She's kind of picturing herself as a man, basically. And I know it's like, it feels weird to talk about like being attracted to yourself, and this autosexuality thing I think sounds strange to some people, but it intuitively makes sense to me. Maybe that's just because I think it's, part of the way that my sexuality functions too. But it is like this being kind of unattracted to yourself in the same way that autosexuality is being attracted to yourself. It's like the pushing away from like, this is so unappealing.
Yeah, there's definitely that part of it, for sure. I think for me there's like a mix of that unappealing aspect And then there's also the fact that I did not really fit in with girls very well. The group of girls that I did kind of hang out with in high school were kind of outcasts as well, in our like church community and all that. And granted, it is church, so the patriarchal standards are much stronger and all that. Maybe that had an element of like influence on me, but it was just a level of guys were more blunt. They were a bit more to the point. They were typically engaged in activities that I found more interesting, and I always felt like they were not as accessible to me for physical reasons or mental reasons or whatever. But if it's one of those things that I struggle with sometimes, though, because I don't know if the identification came first and the hobbies came after, or if I always would have had those hobbies regardless. But the social integration part for me was definitely like just as important as kind of the dysphoria part. I feel like some people have dysphoria, but they don't really care if they integrate socially. Like I'm not picking on Brianna here for any particular reason, but she does come across as somebody who might have been dysphoric, but doesn't really care to socially integrate as much as like she insists otherwise. Like she's making video games. She's got pictures of her with like all these minifigures on the walls behind her. And I'm like, that's base. I don't even care. Like, I'm not even going to judge you for that. It's just like, be honest, but like, I know for me,
she loves to talk about her female socialization. She loves to say that was such an important part of the process, and she likes to like shit on other trans women and insinuate that they haven't been properly socialized in the way that she has. And it's incredible, actually, especially in sorry, you put me on
you're fine. You're fine. I love it.
In light of like the recent debates and stuff that she's been doing, the irony is so rich, because when she talks about her female socialization, she says the biggest thing that she learned about women is how to take turns. That is what she said was the biggest thing she learned, is how to take turns. With women, it's a give and take. You got to take turns. And she's just been in all of these debates where she's just like railroading people.
I'm gonna keep talking. I'm gonna keep talking if you don't mind. I'm gonna finish this. I was like, I'm sorry, but like, I will own it. I am female socialized. I am very apologetic. I also have a tendency to interrupt people, so like, or at least I used to as a kid. So I get very like worried about it. It is crazy though. Like I was this past weekend. I never told her my YouTube channel, so I hope she never finds me. But I was hanging out with a trans woman, and like I've become much more open-minded since my trans med days. So I try to give everybody a chance. I'm like, I don't care if you pass or even on estrogen or testosterone. I don't care. I just want to like find other friends and like learn about other trans people, Yeah. And the first meeting went well. We talked and everything. Definitely more of a leftist than I am, but I have been opening up more to like some of those ideas or whatever. Second
I'll
meeting,
turn you away from that before you turn too far left. Anyway, continue.
I insist on being an open-minded leftist regardless. So like I will always be, I'm never going to screech at people, but second meeted, I had this feeling like she kept bringing up patriarchy and all these things, and obviously me having been identified more with like the masculine side of things for so long, I've always been kind of defensive of like the male side to like feminist issues and that kind of thing. It used to be worse. Like I think before I transitioned, I was genuinely more misogynistic and maybe toxically masculine, even like, no, definitely toxically masculine, kind of out of a sense of like having to project, I guess. But I've always been kind of sympathetic to that. And I've never kind of understood like the deal people have with masculinity. It seems like if you're too masculine, people just kind of turn off and they don't listen to you anymore. Ironically, I think in other spaces it's probably the other way around, where if you're too feminine, that happens. But with this trans woman I was talking to, I started to try and give some of my opinions on like, patriarchy and how like I can see the other side. I can see the male side sometimes on certain aspects, whatever. And she, at some point she just goes, "Oh, Oliver, you're such a boy." And it was like said in the same way that people might say like, "You're such a woman," or like, "Oh, just don't worry your pretty little head about it," type of thing. I was like, just tell me to get back in the kitchen at that point. Like, I don't know what this is. Like, why am I getting like mansplained to about things that I've probably just objectively had more experience with? Like, I don't know, saying all that to say, like, I don't know exactly where I was going with that. You brought up Rihanna. I wanted to say like, oh yeah, I am female socialized. I don't understand what the deal is about accepting that you are male socialized. Like, I hate that is such like a bad thing to accept about yourself, or that you are like a biologically male. Like, I don't see a problem with that. I think it's fine. So, but yeah,
It's
tangent.
her AGP that just won't let her accept that.
Yeah.
That she's very typically male, despite the Porsche garage.
And the sex
And the
dungeon,
video-
who knows?
I design video games like normal women. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. It's funny that you said that you were sort of like a misogynist at one point. That feels like very common. Like there's so many. Yeah, right. Aaron can relate to that, and like I know a lot of trans women who are like just complete misandrists. Like just they hate men in part because they hate their maleness,
Mhm.
And there's this like it's been hypothesized that there's like sort of different domains of dysphoria. And so one is like the kind of straightforward anatomic dysphoria, right? Which is self-explanatory. And then there's like interpersonal dysphoria and like wanting to be sort of like treated and seen as the opposite sex and interacted with in that way. And so a lot of like MTFs, the worst thing they could imagine being is a human that hurts women, and that's how they see men, right? And so they are like disgusted by their own power in any, like these things are really upsetting to them. And so that kind of makes sense to me. With regards to the socialization thing, I mean, I put less emphasis on that. Not like socialization is real and true, and like the fact that people live X amount of time in their lives as a woman or as a man impacts yes, the way that people interact with them and how they're going to interact with the world. But there's something that just feels like a little too nebulous about the idea of like, oh, I was female socialized, or even that like I can then be male, like Brianna said, I can then do my female socialization. Like, well, not really, especially like you, I don't think you ever, no one ever was really seeing female when they were looking at her,
Right.
Maybe with the exception of like the last year, like her most recent round of FS, although I still think it's a little bit uncanny valley. But yeah, I just think like it is just kind of sex differences, and there are psychological sex differences, right? And all of these different sex differences, and these aren't bad things, and they're not uniform, and it's not every female is going to be this way and every male is going to be this way. But I do find a lot of trans people put a lot of emphasis on the socialization thing.
Because we want it to be external, like this was externally put upon
done to me.
Yeah, through socialization.
So true. That is so true.
Yeah.
This masculine, especially for like an MTF, right? This masculinity is not my natural state. This is what the world put on me because I was born in, because I have this disorder of being accidentally born a man, and the world saw a man and they socialized me. So that's a really good point. That it needs to be entirely external.
That's an
interesting way. They hate evolutionary psychology. They hate it.
This is my wife's first appearance on the Navel case, guys.
Kelly,
what's up?
She can't hear you because I have my headphones in. Wow, so exciting. Yeah, she's real, guys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see like the externalizing thing. I think that does happen a lot, and it's very easy to use like the typical like quote unquote woke frameworks to externalize all that stuff. I mean, I feel like even cis people do that a lot. Like cis women a lot will, from what I've seen, they externalize like what they do because of patriarchy or the social conditions they're born into or whatever. I guess like I might take like a slightly different approach to like viewing that stuff because I guess for me, right, and this could be like partly my own dysphoria talking or whatever. I feel like I come close to like passing and all that, but I still have some work to do. I've only been on it for like 2.5 years, but people see, like, they tell me all the time, like, you act like a guy, like you are a guy. Like, I just see you as that, and I do feel like my experience in like male social groups did help me with that I was able to like learn more how guys interact with each other and get kind of like accustomed to, I guess, some of the bluntness and some of the roughness. I've talked to trans guys who haven't had that experience, and it seems like they are still pretty intimidated by like cis males and that kind of thing. I'm not afraid of them at all. Like, you have to actually try and pick a fight with me to be like scared, and I do think that like if you do have like a more diverse social group or whatever, it can help you be better at like doing gender roles, I guess, but that has to come with a caveat that you have to be open-minded and willing to learn, and you have to like recognize that there's a difference, and you have to kind of sit down and listen for a while and actually like observe and learn how people interact, and not just assume that you're going to know that because you are in that social group already, you know, if that makes sense. Like if you've ever seen like if you raise like a cat around dogs, like the cat will act like a dog and vice versa. It's like kind of like that in my opinion. Like it's not like it's not something society does to you, but you don't do it to yourself either. You're just like a product of your of like your surroundings, you know, and that is going to impact how you behave. But like it can differ for other people.
Yeah, I definitely think socialization definitely plays a role. I just think that so many of our kind like to completely ignore the biological, psychological differences.
Yeah,
definitely.
But you're right. It's like it's on its face true that like anyone, cis or trans, can just like observe people of the opposite sex and see how their interactions are different, right? Social psychologists have been doing this for a long time. So there is obviously something to it. And like you said, you need to also like want to take that on or put that on. And sometimes that comes across very natural, sometimes it doesn't.
And it's all about like, you know, self-awareness and kind of bouncing off other people. I don't know. I feel like I'm probably advantaged in a few other ways. One of them being like I did used to like mirror people quite a bit. I know that is like a common thing people do, but I even if I'm around somebody who talks in a different accent than me, like if I'm around them long enough, I will. It's like you start to pick that up. I think there was a few other things. I'm very like hyper self-aware to like an obsessive degree, to the point like I have to take anxiety meds now. I just started them too and they're working great, but like they like I had to actually like start taking meds because like I'm so like overthinking and like obsessing over everything. So I think I know Tally, I was telling you about that book Female Masculinity. There's a part in there where she kind of I don't know if she's quoting somebody else in the book or if she's saying it herself, but she's basically talking about like how butches like they almost like seem to meticulously put their masculinity together, whereas like with a cis guy, it's a little bit less like showy and more like, oh whatever, I'm just gonna throw on a shirt, I don't really care. Like with butches, there seemed to like from her observations, there was like a very like concerted effort to present a certain way, so that it still differed from kind of like your typical masculinity, you know. So I don't know if there was like some of that for me, whereas like especially like in the beginning, I was very much like thinking about it to a conscious degree, so that it like, you know, I internalize it more or something. I don't know. I also have like a computer brain, so it's like I feel like I tend to see things a little bit more objectively because I don't have any feelings towards me being like more feminine or more masculine or whatever. So, but anyway, continue. Sorry.
I was just thinking that just sounds like, you know, you don't have an autism diagnosis, and you don't come across too like we have a lot of people on here like clearly autistic, but like, you don't come across that way, but you probably are on a similar spectrum side as I am.
I got bullied a lot, so you know I masked it.
Well, exactly. No, the female ability to mask that stuff, and I think that's kind of what you're referring to here is like you stand back, you observe people, and then you mirror so that you can blend in and not be a weirdo. And I think that's just kind of like the high functioning autist thing to do. Plus, you know, with female social adaptability is the males. You know, their autism or Asperger's or whatever seems to be way more overt because they're just kind of mentally stunted when it comes to reading social cues and adapting to fit in socially. But yeah, I'm not.
Well, and as I said at one point too, it just seems like, not in every case, you know, asterisk, but like it feels like it's easier for females, not to offend you guys, or females to convincingly put on masculinity than for men or males to convincingly put on femininity. And I think we talked about this a little bit in just even the ways that it like rubs people the wrong way, that people are like much more reactive to MTFs than they might be to FTMs. So I think there is something like it, because this is what you just said about the book, Female Masculinity. It's funny because I've only really heard that book referenced in sort of like rad femme detransition spaces. But But it's so interesting that it says that, because I agree. I think Aaron and I have been talking about butches a lot lately, and there are some people who believe that butch is essentially this like biological category, like this discrete subgroup of females, right, who are just pervasively masculine. But that's not exactly it, because like I guess Jack is pointing out in the book, or someone is pointing out in the book, it is put together. It is intent. And I'm not saying that that's not natural. And Aaron and I talk about this too. I think it's a natural affinity to want to. It's an affinity towards the masculine. It's affinity for masculine things, masculine roles. But it's not necessarily super. And even like when you brought up Ruby Rose in the beginning, it's another perfect example. Like Ruby Rose is a very feminine, soft, delicate woman who can do a really sexy masculinity. Like she was like, oh my God, that's like my ideal type. I call it like soft butch, like pretty butch.
Pretty butch, yeah. It's like the twink for women, like almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Beaver lesbians.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. The Beaver lesbians. That's such a good way to put it.
No, that's not my type, but yes. But yeah,
it was a phase. It was a phase.
But yeah, I do think that there's something right about that, and it's interesting again that you bring that up, and that I've only seen this really discussed in these circles, because in these same circles they will talk about how their female lesbian butch masculinity is just this like totally natural thing, and they will take offense.
Talk about that too.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's not natural. Again, and that's part of Aaron and I's conceptualization of this too. We predict that many people like this will also have been tomboys as children. Like we don't think that this is like some LARP or some lie. But it is a choice. It's an affinity and a choice.
You're jogging my memory now, because she was saying other things in that book as well. I'm not surprised that it falls in the rad femme like detransitioner kind of category, because one thing that she says towards the beginning of the book is that like this actually opened me up more to the idea of non-binary, was the fact that like what do we do with women that don't really fit the category of woman insofar as like femininity and stuff. She goes into like inverts, that apparently that was like an older idea, women who were just like built differently, like it was hard to put your finger on, but you're not quite intersex, but you clearly were masculinized in a more drastic way. There's another book,
like look like a drag queen kind of.
Yeah, there's another book, I haven't finished it. Apparently it's really, really sad. It's called The Well of Loneliness, which is a lesbian love story about a girl, like an Irish girl or something. She goes by Stephen in the book, I believe. And her parents always wanted a boy. They finally get pregnant. They have her, and she just doesn't look quite right. There's something off with her. And her dad realizes like pretty early on, she's never going to have a life as a woman, because, she's never going to make it as a typical female. So he raises her as a boy, and the whole story is kind of like about her journey and then her like love life later on. I didn't get to that part. I related quite a bit to the like beginning of the book, of like the way that she didn't quite fit in and always felt clunky compared to the other women and all that. But there was like this idea that there's women out there who can't quite like make it as in female society, whatever that means at that time. Like I do find that pretty like a pretty interesting theory, and you can use that to like argue in the direction of like anti-patriarchy, smash the patriarchy and get rid of female social roles entirely. I don't know if that's realistic,
That's where the church comes in. And they will say, I think sorry to talk over you. I think there's something to this, which is if the reason for someone's desire to transition is essentially lack of societal acceptance, it seems reasonable for me for the response to be, okay, so shouldn't we try to change society in some way? Not that I think that's an easy goal. It's much easier to change yourself than to change society. But like, I understand the response of like, well, if this person is just basically doing this because they're being treated poorly, because society won't accept them, then that's a problem. That's not a good reason for someone to change all these things. And I think sometimes the TERFs and the gender criticals, they similarly make it all external. They won't acknowledge the deep internal drives that a lot of trans people have to change their physical bodies to look like the opposite sex beyond just like being accepted for their personality.
That's like a couple other interesting things too about that book, was the fact that like apparently that Well of Loneliness book wasn't accepted by feminists at that time. The reason being that the main character, apparently wasn't written like a lesbian woman. Like it was like the people were saying that her attraction for women seemed to mimic much more that of a man than that of a woman. Like it was like, I don't know. This was the 30s, so I wasn't there, but like, so there was that. Yeah.
I haven't read Well of Loneliness, but everything I've read about it reads to me like an AAP fantasy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
that's
I was
what
gonna
it
say,
sounds like.
it's
Yeah,
interesting.
the way you just described it.
Yeah. And another thing that she said in that book as well was that, like, you know, you were talking about the TERFs and gender criticals kind of like externalizing it too. The way I think she put it was that if you like, being butch basically means you're comfortable with standing out. Like you're okay with the fact that you're a masculine woman, you don't quite fit in. And that for FTM, it's much more like you're uncomfortable with the fact that you stand out in that way and that you want to like integrate more into male society or something. I don't know if that was supposed to be a dig. I didn't take it as that. I thought that actually was quite relatable, and the fact that like I stick out in so many other ways because of like so many parts of my life that I'm okay with just blending in for once and being a guy. You know, that's fine with me. But yeah, that was just another interesting thing that I read. It was a really informative book. It's like the only one I've read on the topic, but like it was pretty good. So yeah.
Female masculinity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jack Halberstam, I think. It's a really weird last name. I can't
Okay.
pronounce it, but yeah.
I know who that. Yeah. Did Jack eventually transition?
I don't know because she says in the book there are butches that just go by male names, so I don't know.
Right, and that is true, and that was a thing. I feel like Jack did transition, maybe not even medically, but like, I think I could be getting this wrong, but I know Jack's a pretty like famous character. Again, among this like feminist lesbian detransition scene that I was only in very briefly, and they're not even. There's criticisms coming also from these types of books. Like, what's the big one that everyone references?
What
Gender
I found
Trouble,
the
or...
Blues.
Yeah, Stone Butch Blues.
Oh, Stone Butch Blues. Yeah, I heard of that one. Yeah, haven't read it.
So I haven't read it either. There's a lot of criticism that comes from these, again, like butch, detrans, feminists. Okay,
Jack Halberstam is a he him.
Yeah.
Dug further into this to see about medicalization, but
good. I'm glad we know his pronouns now.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's another book that I haven't read all of it, but I've read chapters of it called FTM. And Aaron and I looked through some of this like many months ago when we were first starting this channel. It was published by a woman who later transitioned, and so she's now a trans man, and so the later publications of this book have her, you know, male name and whatever. But that's a really interesting catalog basically of like the life trajectory of dysphoric females, you know, and FTMs. So that was really interesting. And then, you know, are you familiar with Phil Illy at all?
No, I don't think I am. Let me see.
Okay. Phil is our good buddy.
Okay.
He is an autogynephilic, not transsexual. He's a non-transitioning autogynephile, but he's a cross-dresser.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a great dude. Aaron and I are both really fond of him personally. This is his book. Yeah.
Oh wow, he wrote a book. That's awesome.
I highly recommend it. It's like really well researched, and he lays out the case in really plain language in a super non-judgmental way. And he's not trying to convince anyone to transition or to not transition. He's just his goal, and I think Aaron and I sort of share that in the propagation of this podcast, is just like to give people the information about like what seems to very commonly cause trans, basically, or commonly cause dysphoria, what these common experiences are. And that book was like revelatory. So I'll back up a little bit just for your benefit in case you care so much. Obviously, Aaron is trans.
Yeah, I love it. So. This is a great conversation.
Okay, cool. My wife is a butch lesbian, whatever these things mean, right? She's a woman with an affinity towards masculinity and stuff like that. And she like came out to me as dysphoric. I guess it was like COVID, like early COVID times or right around that time. And I was like I was really, really, really woke at that time. And so I was just like, okay, like, let's just like find the next step, you know, basically of like affirming you and whatever. And then
like, okay, husband.
Yeah. But yeah, I was like, I was very like, I was leading the charge, you know, especially because I was like, I was a proper activist, and I was like researching microaggressions against queer people in school. And so I was like, okay, like, you're transitioning, you know, like, let's like, how do we start? What are the things? And I ordered her binders right away. And I, you know, told other people what her pronouns were so they would all respect it and stuff like that. And then my politics started to change, and I kind of peaked and read about detransitioners and just a bunch of stuff, and kind of walked my wife back from it, which is all fine. Like, she's we're in a good place. She's in a good place. You know, she's the way that she basically feels about her dysphoria at this point is like, she's almost 40. She lived life this long, you know, it's like not ideal, that she's fine and whatever. But one of the like unhelpful things, I think, is the gender critical space, which is where Aaron and I come from. The focus seems to be sort of on like making people avoid the path of transition, or like helping them walk it back if they have regrets. And then the curiosity seems to like just stop. And so what felt frustrating for me and for my wife was, okay, my wife like walked this back. She's like decided that she's not going to transition and feels sort of like confident in that decision, but she's still dysphoric. And there's so much of this conversation that's like, you know, with ROGD and social contagion and like ideological trans. And Aaron and I think there's validity to those things. And there seems to be like cohorts of people that this represents. But also, what about the people who, when they drop the ideology, that the dysphoria doesn't go away? And we feel like that cohort is really not being served. By
I agree.
The gender critical movement, or the trans movement. I mean, the trans movement, I don't really think is serving anybody right now. But yeah. And so it was reading Phil's book that was really revelatory in understanding my wife's experience, and my wife too. And again, my wife is a lesbian and has always identified as such. Well, I'll put an asterisk there. But reading like books, reading Phil's like checklist and stuff, it made sense to her. It was like, I described it as like, when I was asking her questions, the look on her face was like she had been like caught. Like, it was like I had said things that she had never shared with anybody. And I didn't expect her to respond affirmatively to either. Like, it was just like, wow, this is clearly a phenomenon that is other people independently are experiencing. And it was pretty mind-blowing. So I definitely recommend Phil's book. You could buy it if you want to support him, but it's also available for free, entirely for free online on his website.
And I do have to say, it was funny when we first started talking, Tali, last summer before the podcast, and I was explaining my whole lesbian to AA, or my AAP causing lesbianism theory, and you were like, "Wow, maybe my wife is like one of the only real butch lesbians." And then, the
true HSTS female,
right.
I think that like there can be I honestly, I think all sexualities to some degree are like nature and nurture. So I think like there's probably a chance that some butch lesbians do just like being the top or being the guy, and they like being with a woman for pretty non-AAP type of reasons, you know what I mean? Like, I think that can exist.
I haven't found them yet.
I think there can be, you can get like a level of like, maybe they have like one or two elements of it, but I don't know. I mean, obviously I haven't been around that many butch lesbians because I'm in the South, so it's like a weird market out here. But yeah,
I don't entirely disagree with you. Then the question comes to like of this demographic now, who is like dysphoric and like looking to transition and stuff, right? That might tell us something about it. And again, I don't even think these are. It gets complicated too, because it's like, oh, AAP motivations. I think most AAP motivations feel subjectively just like motivation, like just like interest, you know, that it's not, doesn't feel like some like fetishistic or particularly fake or particularly erotic.
Yeah, you can't feel AAP, like you can't feel like a woman or a man or anything. Like,
Right.
it's just a thing that you are.
Yeah. Right. That kind of shapes your psychology.
Yeah.
The way that sexuality shapes our psychology and all of that.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah, we got off a little bit. We were talking about books and stuff. Okay, I don't know where we were. Anyone have a thread to pull?
Oh, geez, I'm trying to remember. I think I might have something. If Aaron, you
go
don't.
for it. Yeah, go.
Oh, I mean, you might want to go. I was gonna say like I wrote like a thread once. I have like an alt account that I talk more about trans stuff on. I haven't posted on it in months, so that's why it's not like more well known. But I did kind of go through like I was running through like the because ever since I transitioned, like I've been kind of obsessed with figuring out why. Like same with you guys. Like I'm just like, why is this happening? Like it's working so well, and I have no idea why. Like with any other medication, I know, but with this, I don't. Right. Yeah. So I've kind of been like going through it in my head, and like I went through like the typical questions that people ask, I guess, like of like females who transition. With first one being like, do I have ROGD? Well, not really. It wasn't rapid in its onset, and I don't even know if I fully agree with like calling it gender dysphoria if it's happening so quickly. Like I have like a bit of contention which with even classifying it that way, you know?
Right.
I think internal consistency of the label.
Yeah. There's also like the go ahead.
I think like the ROGD is kind of a misnomer because it's basically rapid onset trans identification, and it's usually for social or ideological reasons, right? And so calling it gender dysphoria does seem to be misleading.
It can feel dysphoric if your friends are all doing something and you're not. It's like, well, that's dysphoric now because I'm the outsider, right? And it can feel like what you might think dysphoria is, but it's like,
and I think there's also an element of like a really like kind of pornified culture where just normal adolescent development, if you aren't like, you know, super kind of sexually charged early on, right? But they also are like that's being put upon them externally. I could see that feeling like, oh, I don't like this, and then that being classed as gender dysphoria.
Exactly. But I don't know how many ROGD people even actually end up like transitioning. Like I don't know if they actually make up the majority of females who get on testosterone and actually go the full way. It's like I feel like
that's the big question. So Phil is kind of on your train. Phil basically believes among the females who are actually going to go on testosterone and medicalize, he thinks those are majority autoandrophiles.
Because that takes a lot.
Aaron and I are, yes. Also, but just some of the detransitioners and stuff that we've seen seem like that was kind of what happened. That it was essentially like a really intense kind of political and social thing. And I think also just like with the way that in the social justice era that we're living in and the, for lack of better terms, like the oppression Olympics, I think there is like motivation for people to prove their authenticity. To like, so I could see people going on and doing the thing. Yeah. I don't think it's the majority. I don't think the majority of medicalizing female transitioners are picking up a fad or were socially conditioned into it. But I could see, like, it's not as clear to me as it seems to be to you and to Philip. I could see someone who is not genuinely dysphoric, whatever that means, doing the next step. Because it is a step. Sure. It's a stepwise process, right? I feel this thing.
I think they usually also come from a secular background, and they're usually white. And not to be all identitarian about this, but I think it comes from a sense of finally having a sense of community and purpose. And so I think if you grew up in an absence of that, of like a strong sense of community, identity, religion, etc. And I think when the trans thing is, or the queer thing in general is provided to them, it is this really kind of, like this is a morality, a community, etc. I think that's much of the motivation behind it.
Now, here's a weird theory I have. It kind of leads into what you were just saying, Aaron. I actually, in the loose sense of ROGD, I actually think there's a case to be made that might actually apply to trans women more. Like it could potentially. The idea that you can suddenly get horrified with your body, I think, is possible in that direction, and it goes kind of into the same logic that you were just giving, Aaron, for white secular people or like cis straight white guys, for example. Like I don't know any of the stats on this. I don't know any of the numbers, and I hate to offend anybody out there with this, but as much as I hear like TERFs, radfems talk about like, femininity is not at all favorable. People hate women and everything having to do with the female body. I do see like a cultural preference nowadays for femininity. That's not to say that women have an easier time of it. I actually think it hurts women a lot that there's such a high bar now for what is feminine and everything. But that there was an experience I had when I got on testosterone, and that was a bit of a culture shock of how people started treating me differently. How like if I posted pictures, people didn't care as much. If anything having to do with my appearance or just in general, even just in group chats, right? There's just like a much more cold disregard for anything I like really had to say. Especially when everybody in those chats typically is going, "Oh my God, you're so hot, you're so pretty, you're so great," whatever. And then then it's me, and nobody really has much to say, right? And I almost had like a phase of like, I wish I wasn't a guy, I wish I was a girl, which sounds really funny coming from me, right? But there was this like, girls get all the fun, girls have it like, girls get like all this like attention and everything, and it's like, wait a minute, well, I used to be that. Why am I not able to just go and do that, right? For me, the answer is dysphoria, but I'm thinking about it now. If I were a cis male and I were seeing the same behavior among women, would that not like cause like even stronger feelings than what I was having about like how females like socialize or how women interact with each other? And between that and like the amount of anti-male stuff that you kind of see, you just see it around. Like it's not to say that like the government is trying to like feminize all men or make the frogs gay or anything like that, but in so far as just like a cultural trend, I can see, for the same reasons that people try and explain trans men away with like misogyny, I can see an argument in the opposite direction actually for some trans women transitioning because it's just like that bad for them as men. And that like some of the denial of biology kind of comes from the fact that like, they don't want to be the bad guy. You know what I mean? But
I think that
I don't know. Like
it logically makes sense, and I believe that as well. Just because we are really living in a quite misandristic society right now. It's like men are suddenly vilified, and just
we're still in the girl boss era.
Right.
Yeah.
Still
and that's
the girl
not even to
boss
say
era.
like, oh, boohoo, poor men. Men fuck up a lot for reasons, but yeah, sorry, not to.
Oh, you're I completely agree. And then add on to the fact that we're in this kind of like celebrate womanhood kind of era, but then there's also the fact that just how the sexes have always been that women get a lot of the world is much softer, as I explained it. The world is much softer to women than to men, but digging into it, like it always comes back to AGP, to be honest. Like I assumed that there was this rapid onset or this social desire to be kind of mollycoddled as women are and celebrated, and you get to be the most beautiful oppressed lesbian, trans woman, etc. I assume that did have a lot of social appeal and social cachet, but when you drill down to it, it's still euphoria boners all the way down. So
and that makes sense. Like I'm not very like well read on this stuff. Sorry, but go ahead.
No, you're okay. Aaron and I spend a lot of time talking to autogynephiles also. So we talk to a lot of HG.
That's a good point.
But that is a really common sentiment from trans women is like, like I don't want to be the oppressor, but they'll say it in a way, and I believe them. It's not just like I want to get out of being viewed that way. It is this like, it is part of this AGP. It is this like disgust towards the danger of males, and they don't want to be. It horrifies them to be seen that way because they don't want to be that thing. They don't want to be that way. I can see potentially with like especially some of like the non-binary males, who Aaron and I also think that pretty much is entirely enveloped by autogynephilia. But I could see how, yeah, that sort of like middle of the road, like I don't want to be treated as the cis straight white guy, so I call myself non-binary. Like I could see that, and that would get you social cachet, that would get you treated a little bit differently, that suddenly makes you like safe to the girls, you know, like you're the gays and they whatever. So that I could see that. But similar to what you were saying about the females, I think the males that are gonna medicalize, they're not just motivated by not being the cis white straight oppressor.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, as far as like the people who go all the way medically, like for sure, I can see that. I think it's like it's a bit interesting because estrogen does take a longer time. It is like a different process than testosterone, which I think like it has the potential, I guess, to like complicate that a little bit, because with T, you know, if you're talking about ROGD people, you don't really have that much time to change your mind. So it's like safer to just never take it. Versus with estrogen, like you've got like a range of like it takes a while to kick in, and then for a while you might just look like a younger guy or like a more feminine guy, and it's like you can get kind of like closer and closer. But at the same time, the more you feminize, I feel like the more you still lose that like threatening presence to women or like whatever group you're trying to get into, you know. So like I definitely agree. I think like ultimately like nobody really does this stuff, I think, just purely out of like social acceptance or desire for like social validation, but it is something that like I'm kind of interested in, because for me, and I think like Frankie and I might have some of this in common, like I started getting pretty resentful to the trans community when I realized that once you pass as a guy, like they just don't really care anymore, and it's you're kind of treated with like contempt. I've seen like there's this weird subgroup of like trans guys. I see them mainly on Twitter. They actually seem to get pleasure out of like shitting on more masculine trans guys as a way to like get in good with the trans women. It's this like really weird dynamic where you're basically being a pick me to other females to get acceptance from a male, just like you would in like cis society, but it's just like it's all like flipped around now, you know. And it's just like it's bizarre to me. But I do think like there is like that to me indicated like a bias again against like masculinity or just like anything having to do with that realm of like gender expression. And it that's actually kind of what made me more feminist in a way. It was just like, hey, just you know what, so now I'm not a sex object anymore, nobody cares what I have to say, well fuck you guys, you know. Like I don't know, I don't know, I might be like stumbling through my thoughts a little bit here.
No,
it is something that frustrates me, you know. But yeah.
No, I get that. I hear that. And frankly, Frankie definitely expressed stuff like that in our conversation. I think it's not to dismiss how you are feeling. I find it like a little funny because both sides in the trans community do this. So the trans women are like, ooh, we are the most oppressed, you know, we're more oppressed than the cis women even, right? Like we are the most vulnerable category that there is.
Right.
And then some of the trans men do this thing of like, yeah, like the patriarchy is still existing in the trans community, you know, and it's a little funny because it just gets back to like, well, yeah, there are sex differences. We're just like continuing to observe sex differences.
It's a great way to put it. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't take it as oppressed. I don't feel oppressed. You know what I mean? I don't feel oppressed by this. I go about my life, and you know, I'm a man. I'm gonna say what's on my mind. You know, so fuck you guys. But like, you know, I think like trans men, if they have a problem with it, they need to say something. They can't just like resort back to like patriarchy if they want to really like.
It's just lame. No one likes
themselves, but yeah,
no one likes when women whine about patriarchy, and it's even less endearing when a trans man does it.
It really is. It's annoying to me. I hate it when they do it. So like, yeah. But it is just one of those like things I'm gonna take note of, especially when it comes to like AGPs who won't acknowledge their sex. You know, it's like I think it is important to like kind of think about sometimes.
No, totally, and it is. And I have found that the females seem on average more accepting of recognizing the biological reality, like just the amount of like I know so many AGPs who saying male is really difficult for them in a way that
I can't blame them either. Like I'd probably feel that way too if I was trans woman, you know. So it's like it's rough.
Well, okay, so this what you were just saying, Tali, kind of leads into what I was about to comment on. Is I think this might not be specific to women or to trans men or trans people in general, but right now we're kind of in a cultural moment where victimhood is social currency, right? And so I think a lot of trans men are going to lean into, they're going to try to use the trans status or the female status, victim of patriarchy, like wherever the victimhood points can come from. You got a few different avenues to reach from. And then, like you were saying, Tali, is trans women seem more reluctant to accept their maleness than trans men are to accept their femaleness. And it could be also maybe that it's like when you're letting go of a victimhood point. Obviously, it's the AGP that inhibits them from acknowledging their maleness. But I also think it could also be like, oh no, that's when you're not a trans woman or a type of woman, and you're accepting the fact that you're male. You have you've put yourself on the top of the patriarchy if you're still a believer in patriarchy, and that's and obviously the more victimhood points, the more social value you have, and so.
And in very real ways, the more victim points you have, the more people listen to you.
That's what I was kind of going to say.
It's just true. Like, it's like, on the one hand, this is like, we're all kind of like experiencing this emotionally, right? And like feeling these pressures and stuff. And like, yes, we all want to look like the good person, and looking like the good person means being a victim, right? We have totally equated those things. But also, I just remember so vividly from when I was a radical leftist, which I was for a long time. You are supposed to listen to marginalized voices. And so you are actually not taken seriously, not listened to, if you are not like constantly pushing all your oppression cards out there.
And it sucks that people feel like they have to make a case for why they should be listened to, when it really should just be like, just listen to people in general. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think that like there's this I definitely buy the victim point thing. Like that's very clearly like a thing. Everybody's kind of acknowledged it at this point. I think sometimes it gets like misconstrued because oppressive groups will also find, or oppressor groups will also find like ways to be listened to, and when they don't get listened to, they do things like vote for Trump. In my opinion, at least, it's like when that was guys, or like a large majority of the country saying like, we don't feel listened to, this guy listened to us, and that's why we support him, and I think that like it's unfortunate that we've gotten to the point of empathy carries like so much weight. I don't think it's possible for people to have empathy for everybody all the time. Like it's kind of like insulin, where eventually you run out and then you're kind of screwed. Like you have to be selective with who you care about. And
have you heard the term suicidal empathy?
Yes, I have. I think I might have a case of that a little bit sometimes, but like
it's a really good construct. Gadsad talks about it a lot. He's a Canadian Lebanese. Is he a philosopher? I forget which domain he works in. But this might be his current book that is about to come out. Yeah, but he talks a lot about suicidal empathy. He talks about it more on like a bit more meta, like on the cultural level, like nations and peoples with this sort of suicidal empathy, right? Carrying everyone sort of at the expense of yourself. That was a bit of a side tangent, but you're right though. We literally can't have empathy for everyone, nor should we necessarily. Like it's actually, I think, sort of like an inverse of like you actually should have more empathy for your family and your friends and the people that are within your sphere of influence that you can actually do anything about, like it's so I think there's
you're right. I think my video before the Brianna one I did was on a guy who called Solari, who is just like, he's a cringe bread tuber that I wanted to make fun of because he was really whiny, but something I kind of like bring up there
is philosophy YouTube, just so
yeah. It's like
I knew that one.
But basically, like what I said in that video, and this is something that I genuinely believe, is that like we have this massive weak spot where we don't realize that people can use our compassion against us, and that like not every threat is just so like overtly aggressive, like in nature. Like you do have these like softer threats that like come through where they are able to like weaponize your empathy and all that. And I think it comes from a general plight that the progressive side has kind of worked themselves into, in the sense that they've relied too much on people's empathy for minorities to carry like human rights issues, when in reality there is a very strong case for human rights, for every minority group, but people refuse to make them because they've gotten in this habit of just relying on people feeling sorry or having like an emotional reaction to these like groups. And of course, now you get to trans people, where it's much harder to do that, especially when TRAs tend to push for the worst positions you possibly could. And the rest of the country is basically at this point, like, all our empathies run out. We've done it for the Black people and the Hispanics and the immigrants and everybody else. And you guys are kind of at the last of the line. We just don't care anymore. So, it's like, I think generally, I think we will start to do better once we drop that need to just resort to like the feel arguments for everything, and start like making stronger cases for things again. We
also need to stop telling people how to feel and telling them that they're a bad person if they don't feel a certain way.
Yeah.
There's something that just came up for me too. Oh, sorry, you go first, Aaron.
I was just gonna say, I think that I'm kind of. I think you may have pointed this out to me, Tali, before. It's like people get mad at me because I don't respond to the victimhood stuff. So somebody listens like, oh, this is all these reasons you should feel bad for me. And I'm just like weeding through that. I'm like, okay, so what's your point? and I don't acknowledge like all the victimhood stuff. I'm supposed to, oh, I'm so sorry. And yeah, that's, I miss it.
Which I think that's a good trait. It makes it more difficult. It creates more social friction for you, but I think it's a useful trait at the very least.
Aaron is officially based, so
yeah.
I just like, I'm allergic to manipulation. So I just see all of that as you're trying to manipulate people, and it's like clear through that and get to what is, the basis here. But
right. And trying to manipulate people because it works, and because these people have been told that you need to list all of these things before you speak, right? So it's not like always
in order to have value,
necessarily trying to manipulate you.
Right.
It's just how they know to speak to be taken seriously, like you said, Oliver, right? It's like, this is the way that people listen to me, is when I first front load it with all of these reasons that I'm so oppressed and such a victim. I think too, something, this is a bit of a side tangent, which just is what I do, but part 2 of like the civil rights stuff, and this kind of takes me into just like the trans politics and like where are things going to go from here, is there's this emphasis also on like immutability and being born this way. And for understandable reasons, like when we think of civil rights legislation before even it included sexuality, let alone gender identity, it was based on immutable characteristics. And the point was, someone being born by some virtue of their birth shouldn't be used against them, right? Whether that's where they were born or their ethnic lineage, right? Or their sex, right? These things that are just out of someone's control shouldn't be used against you. And that is what subsequent civil rights movements have leaned on, I think, in a somewhat fallacious way. And I remember like someone that I listened to a lot is Brad Palumbo. I don't know if you guys know him. Aaron, I'm sure you know Brad. No, you don't. God damn it. So, no. Do you know who Brad Palumbo is?
Yeah, I made fun of him a little bit in the Brianna video. But
yeah. So I like Brad. I mean, I don't agree with him on everything, but I like Brad. I think he's a cool dude. He is like a sort of like libertarian, center-right gay man who a couple years ago started talking a lot about like the LGBTQIA stuff. Anyway, he talks about essentially like the reason for gay rights and stuff is because we're born this way. And it's like out of our control. And at first I take issue with the fact that I don't think all gay people are born this way. I don't think that all people who are exclusively and sincerely only attracted to the same sex were necessarily born with some revulsion to the opposite sex or whatever. So I think things are a little more complicated. But also, I don't know if that's a good reason. And it's the same thing with trans. And that's why trans has now had to become, I was born this way. I was born in the wrong body. This experience is actually by dint of my birth defect was being born in the wrong sex, basically. And the idea is that, right, we need to respect these people and respect this category and make these accommodations because they can't help it. And I think that, and for gay rights too, that's not the right. I don't think that's the most effective way to frame it, partially because it's not true. And if it's not true, it's going to fold. It brings me back to our conversation with Hunter and Diane, which is like, the truth is going to win because it's true. It's just like eventually the bullshit kind of falls to the side. And I think the stronger case for sexuality and gender protections is essentially that it's not hurting anyone, that we live in a free liberal society, and these are choices, including who you sleep with. Your sexuality is a choice to that extent too. People don't like when I say that. Sure, your desires aren't. What you choose to do about that, how you choose to live your life, these are choices. Same thing with gender, same thing with transition. And so I think I know I really went off the beaten path there, but yeah, there's this idea that for our victimhood also to be valid, it needs to be this immutable thing that we didn't choose. It needs to be out of our hands, basically, in order for someone to respect it. And I don't think that's the wise way to go about this, because it's not true, especially for trans people. Trans people should really leave that at the door. It's obviously not true. Even if it feels that way to people.
I think also this is like the exact opposite I used to be from where I used to be at with the transmed stuff. But I do think that just having some sense of humor about it, and just saying there is just gender fuckery that has always occurred. I kind of thought about it at one point, if I don't know if this makes me officially non-binary or something like that, but I feel like transsexual is kind of like the non-binary of it is the third gender. There's man, there's woman, and then there's the people who are on some level on the in-between, whether it's because you're trans or because you're just androgynous or whatever. There is that third category of miscellaneous, where I feel like transsexuals and everybody else kind of fall. And I think that having some fun with that, and just not worrying about if you're AAP or AGP and stuff. I hate that those things are stigmatized. It's there's zero reason for that. There are people who literally have sex with each other in fursuits or whatever else not. But if you are somewhat attracted to yourself being something, now it's a problem. I don't get that.
Right.
It makes no sense. Even Tyler, the creator, is known for saying, I want to fuck myself or something like that. Just it's fine to have
that's
that.
That's gonna send
other
Aaron
letters in
the
the
rabbit hole. Yeah.
He said that at one point. But I know he's got some sexuality stuff as well. So might be. I don't know if he just said that because he used to be a bit of an edge guy, but there I'm sure you can find pretty good examples of this autosexuality type stuff. In fact, actually, shoot, did either of you guys read Nancy Drew books as a kid?
I didn't.
No. There's a character in those books named George. She's a woman who dresses like a boy, basically, and that's one of Nancy's best friends. She's in most of the books. There's Bess, who's the very feminine one, and then there's George, who's basically, I think, a butch or something like that. But I don't think she's attracted to women or anything like that. It seems like she likes guys and everything. I don't know when these books were written, but it was a long time ago. That was one of the book series I read as a kid, and I love that archetype growing up, was just the female that looked like a male.
Yeah. Was it just, so you mentioned this kind of also with the Mulan stuff and all that.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself specifically attracted to the storylines where it's a female who looks male, or more generally to transformations and gender bending in general?
Shoot, I want to think. I don't think it was to transformations in general. I think it was specifically to females who cross-dressed and that kind of thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and there's a whole, I'm pretty sure there could be a whole rabbit hole just on that. I'm starting to reread the series now. It's called the Jackie Faber series. It's similar story plot, at least in the first book. Street urchin in London or something like that gets to the shore, dresses as a boy, and then gets on a ship so that she can get some work on this big ship, right? And she has to hide the fact that she's female the entire time, because she's, as she puts it in the book, she's afraid that they're just going to chuck her off the boat or leave her in Africa or something to work for a sultan or something like that. It's a very funny book. It's very humorous. And that character is distinctly not trans or anything like that. She talks about wanting to grow up and being a lady and everything, but she does it for like protective purposes. But it was still like interesting to see, like there were still things I could relate to, just as far as like being undercover and like, oh, what if I get caught, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a cool, like it's an interesting like archetype of character that like I wish there were more books and stories that like had that in them. But that was like the closest thing that I had as like, you know, as a kid to what felt like real or what felt like it related to me, you know. But yeah,
I think there's something to also like this neurodivergent spectrum, you know, of feeling like you are undercover.
Yeah.
Like I relate to that too. Like,
hell yeah.
Yeah. Right. That you're different from the rest. There's like this
doing a human performance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
For
Which
sure.
is why I always liked waitressing, because it was like a performance on the performance. It was like then that's how I saw it. It was like I'm every like table, everyone that I go and speak to, it is I'm like I get to like act and it's this like undercover thing. Yeah. A little less dramatic in that one, but that's it. So it's not a kid's book, or it is?
I think it's like young
You're
adult.
revisiting. Okay.
But it's
How
funny.
old are you?
27. So yeah, but I'm not a great reader, so those books are still a challenge a little bit. Not really, but like there's still like some adult themes in them, whatever, you know. But like I intend on actually finishing the series this time, because last time I started it, I never finished the entire series. But yeah, that's cool stuff.
It does seem to be a theme in there. Like I really like the show growing up called The Young Riders, about the early days, about the Pony Express, right? So like frontier America. Anyway, had a bunch of, in real life, I think they were like 13, 14-year-old boys, because they could ride, but they were small. And so it was just a case of trying to get the mail, you know, as fast as possible from one express station to the next. And yeah, one of the characters was a girl, again, disguised herself as a boy to be on the Pony Express. I think it is like this theme that's in a lot of literature. And obviously you don't really see the inverse, because I guess it isn't as possible that, you know, men aren't so good at just dressing up like a woman and
right. But they have a lot of like gay literature and stuff, like gay coded literature and stuff. There's a lot of that, like where people debate whether the relationships between two men it's like secretly a homoerotic thing or whatever. I feel like there's a lot of that. You got like
something that's written for women.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. I think anything that's kind of like semi homoerotic, and it's in literature, it's pretty much always, I think, written typically by and for women most often.
Well, we found out that like some of like the most popular like gay male drawn porn was done by like a couple like internet lesbians, and it's like that's a red flag, and just or rather an interesting note there.
That's not surprising to me, but
yeah. Well, and there's something that you said about that character being sort of tomboyish, or I guess it was with George, but like straight or whatever. That's something that really gets lost. I don't know if you saw our most recent conversation with Laura Becker, but we talked about that with her. And like when she was a teenager and stuff, she was assumed to be a lesbian because Laura's a dysphoric autoanthrophile and had an affinity towards masculinity and masculine clothes and stuff like that. And so she was dressing like a butch lesbian, but she was a straight, like she was interested in men, you know?
Yeah, I've heard about that too. It's very
that was my pre-transition experience too. Yeah.
And there is something on both sides of this, and on both sides, meaning the males and the females, and also on both sides, meaning the gender criticals and the TRAs. There's a lot of weirdness going on with sexuality stuff. And so like both sides kind of lean into the gay lark.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
The gender critical side needs everyone who was transitioned to have actually been a homosexual, and they include bisexuals as homosexuals. And no shade to the bisexuals, I'm essentially a bisexual. It's just like not the exact same thing and doesn't have the same predictive whatever. But then also a lot of trans people do this too, and it's really starting to grind my gears when I'm just seeing, like, obviously autogynephilic trans women talk about how they were twinks, and they were what was the word that someone used the other day and it really pissed me off? I can't remember. But flamer. No, flamer. It was the Marcy, the young trans woman who got arrested in Florida, who wrote in and said, I'm going to come use the wrong restroom or whatever. I'm going to come use the women's restroom. And then she went into the state capitol and she was arrested for using the women's restroom. And the trans community is really eating this up right now. I listened to this girl speak. She seems not very, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm like the most pro autogynephile. I get shit on it, all the time for why you have so much sympathy and affinity for these people. But so, like, I'm not against trans women at all. She didn't seem very thoughtful. She seemed like she was looking for 15 minutes of fame. And she was just, to me, obviously not a gynephile. Again, no problem with that. But she's talking about, like, no one cares because all of us were flamers, like, we're obviously so feminine. I'm just like, first of all, you're not that feminine right now. Like, you have long hair and, like, I'm not saying that, like, your transition isn't working in terms of aesthetics, but, like, you're not effeminate, like that, like, dispositionally. And everyone does this LARP. And it's and for a lot of people, it's easy to just lean into. And it's like, you weren't a gay man before this. And, like, you, Oliver, you weren't meaningfully a lesbian before this, even if you're totally into women. It's like, and part of it makes sense. And I say this to Aaron all the time. The most, like, intuitive understanding of trans is essentially extreme gays. Like, that's the most intuitive understanding. These are the people who are so masculine for being women or so feminine for being men that they just transition because they're almost there, basically, right? It's like they're so close to that side, they just, like, go
tipped over the edge. Yep.
Yes, exactly. And we think of those people, we think of the most masculine women and the most feminine men as homosexuals. But it's not true. And, like, the overwhelming majority of trans people are bi, really, or straight, I say bi, though, because really even the straight ones, like the heterosexual autogynephiles, many of them will be in, like, transbian relationships. So they're having sex with males. They're not quite men, the people they're having sex with, right? Like, all these things are complicated. But, sorry, the overwhelming majority of transitioners are not homosexuals. And I think that matters.
I think it really is, like, it's a category of its own. Like, anything transsexuality related, it's like, that's why it's its own letter in the LGBT. It's because it is just its own category of, like, you've got chasers, you've got, like, a GAMP, like, all these things. Like, it all kind of falls under the T letter, and so it's like, you're not a lesbian, I'm not a gay man, you know what I mean? Like, in fact, it's funny. When I went to a gay bar once and got uncomfortably hit on, like, quite a bit, and it actually made me feel more like a woman than I've ever felt in, like, a straight bar. So I was like, I'm only going with my partner from now on. But, like, it's like, I'm not a gay man. I'm just not. Like, I can love the vibes, the gay vibes, and all that. I can love, like, what they do. I'm never going to be that, and it's just, I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? I'm also never going to be, like, a full on woman either. I kind of have a little bit of, like, fluidity in the sense that, like, I can get along with both now, probably a little bit better than before. But I am just kind of, like, my own thing. I am kind of my own category, both sexuality wise and just, like, gender wise. And I think that should be embraced, like, 100%. I think that is what, like, trans pride should be about. That's what I want to say that's what it used to mean, despite what Brianna might say about, like, all the gatekeeping back then or whatever. It just meant that, you had more clocky people, but, like, there is, like, that level of, like, we do have, like, something there. There is something that, like, makes us cool, I guess, if you want. People just don't like to hear that it might include autosexuality instead of, like, being well, I transitioned and now I'm a lesbian.
A brain defect or something.
Yeah. Like, it's not as easy as just transitioning to another letter of the alphabet soup that is the gay community. So, Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. Like, we should embrace it. But yeah.
I really appreciate that when you're in your Brianna Wu video when you're basically like, yeah, being trans is weird. Like we are not just normal members of the sex we're aspiring to be. It's like, that's fine, but like let's just be honest about what it is here. And I used to be a trans medicalist too, and so now I find, and I'm not sure if you it sounds like you kind of feel the same way. It's like now the trans medicalists seem much more cringe than the more woo woo gender is meaningless kind of trans people, they're I think the trans medicalist, not only is it just like the more cringe, it's also the more, I think, mentally unhealthy and unstable to kind of think of like I used to think of like myself as a male with a birth defect. It's like that's not reality, and also it's like it's just not a healthy way to think.
I've seen some trans meds that it's like it was this trans woman at one point who transitioned, kept pointing the finger at everybody else about not being like true trans or whatever, and then all she would do is call herself a gay man the whole time. I was like, I'm just a gay man with a medical disorder, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, it seems like the medical disorder hasn't been cured by your transition if you're still calling yourself a man. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's so many levels of like, I'm trying to be special at this point. Like, give it up. Like, it sounds like you regret it, Like,
I think they do that to basically be like, I'm not an autogynephile. Like
totally.
I'm a gay man. Yeah, because that's so much better.
Brianna started doing. And I don't know like how your dive into Brianna was, but Brianna, since she came out as trans, which like, oh wow, nobody could have ever known. But since she came out of trans like 6 months ago or whatever, this past, I'm not trying to be mean. She fucking blocked me again. So fuck Brianna. But shit, where the fuck are they going with this? Oh yeah, she's totally like, in the last 6 months to a year, she's been talking about how she was a twink. She was this, and no, you weren't. And then she used to post about being bisexual because she's a bisexual autogynephile. And that's what most autogynephiles are, bisexual, frankly. I think today, at least, like that's, especially with like the way that the medicalization has progressed and the more like T for T relationships that you see, like that's bisexuality to a certain extent, right? And so she stopped calling herself bisexual. She even went as far as to say, she's been talking about like her like drug use on Dollcast. She's talked about how she was like ketamine treatments and stuff.
Yeah.
She said that like her most recent ketamine treatment, she totally realized that she was never into women, that was just like part of her, again, like socialization and like trying to cope. And she's always only ever been into men. And yeah, it's just not true, and it's not helpful. And I don't even remember where the fuck I was going with this, but yeah, everyone does this. They lie about their sexuality. I guess that's what it is. And it's because people were calling her AGP and stuff like that, and she wants to separate herself from that. And something that I find frustrating about her and with the Dollcast stuff is she is just like a hypocrite. She does just want the gate. She wants the gates built directly around her. That's the type of gatekeeping that she wants. And I've had an evolution in how I feel about this stuff because, again, I was like a total radical lefty. Like everyone should get to be affirmed from the second that they tell you and whatever. To then like, oh yeah, we need strict gatekeeping and self-ID is the problem, and maybe no one should transition. I felt that for a while. Like transition is just never a safe or ethical option. I don't feel that way anymore, even if I don't think it should be anyone's first choice. And I would encourage people to be discouraged about it. I think it's okay to have pushback. I think people should be told this is going to be really hard and I don't know if you should do it. But yeah, I think like she wants to believe that if we go back to the Benjamins and the exact standards that were used when I did it, that we're going to like totally resolve this problem. But the Benjamins were not a brain scan. We were still not getting at any like discrete medical phenomenon. It is a subjective psychological experience. And that might be good. That's good. That's perhaps good enough reason to treat it. Like, not so loosey-goosey and willy-nilly, but yeah. And she wants, like, she'll make fun of the fetishistic cross-dressers and the autogynephiles, even though her co-hosts are out of the closet, self-admitted autogynephiles.
Yeah.
She decides the bathrooms, obviously she should have access to the bathroom. So she draws the line on penises, anyone after vaginoplasty should go to the bathroom. Okay, well, your two co-hosts here who are much more feminine physically and in demeanor than you have their penises. And it's like, I just realized like that the rules, I think, basically need to be that anyone can transition with really good informed consent. And I think it should be adults, like I don't think kids should have access to it at all.
Nah, me neither.
Period. But it really it should be, it's funny because it seems like only honest people are like the Andrea Long Chews. When she wrote that essay, is it for the New York Times or the New Yorker, advocating for youth transition, but basically just saying like, this is a self-determination issue, like we should be able to change our bodies, whether it helps us or not, whether I have a diagnosable disorder of dysphoria or not, it shouldn't matter. Like we should have agency over our own bodies, change our own bodies. That's actually, to me, the only compelling argument left.
Yeah.
It's the only one
libertarian take.
It's the only one rooted in reality. Yeah. That like people are choosing this for different reasons. And as adults, we should let people make informed decisions about this choice. But this idea of like, no, as long as we make sure that they hit 6 of these criteria and they go to 3 months of counseling, then we know they're really trans. And it's just like, that's not how it works. And I get into arguments with like younger self-identified autogynephiles about this too, about like youth transition and stuff. And it's like, even if this person remains trans for the rest of their life, they might regret certain surgeries, certain procedures, certain things that they did that preclude them from other procedures. They might grow up and decide that even if it's something that they really wanted for 20 years, that they decided, I kind of lived with it this, and we know people like this. I kind of lived with it this long, like I don't want to mess with my health more for whatever reason. I don't want to have this very dangerous, almost experimental surgery, right? Like, so, I think there are good reasons for the standard to just be informed consent and not even pretending like, and I do want therapy for anyone who's going to undergo this. I want some type of exploration, and I want informed consent, but I don't think we should even be pretending that we can like meaningfully decide who is trans and who will benefit from this.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Shoot, I was going to say something. You said something that like hit was like ringing a bell for me, and then I lost it. But
I say a lot of things, unfortunately.
No, you're good. I think it was it was about the criteria and everything. I do have to run soon, but I do want to say like one other problem that I have with like Brianna's model and like with a lot of the like medicalizing of it as like a condition and all that is that we don't really have research on anybody except like trans women. Maybe you could even specify it more to white trans women if you wanted to, but like there's a very like narrow window of like research that we actually have available like historically, because you had people were just amazed by the idea of a man wanting to become a woman, you know what I mean? So there's like people who studied it, you have Blanchard and everything, and then when it comes to FTMs or like even non-binary people, like there really isn't very much. There's just like the kind of discourse we have and like books that are written about the topic and stuff, but no scientist has really like delved into it. So I find it like again, I normally don't make appeals to like, patriarchy or anything like that, but when you're talking about like medical stuff, there is like an element of medical sexism there as well. And so far as just like, well, we'll take it seriously if it's a male to female. If it's a female to male or anything like that, well then it could be ROGD or hysteria, or you're making it up or something, or you're trying to escape misogyny. And it's just like, it feels like people are willing to do everything except study it medically for what it is. And Brianna does the same thing. I think recently she said, like, I've never looked at an FTM describe their experience and thought, that's me. And it's like, well, I can't think of a more male chauvinistic thing to say. I'm sorry. It's like, well, if I can't relate to it, it must not be real. It's like, okay. Oh, you can't find a study on FTM stuff? Checkmate, liberal. I got you now. Like, we haven't studied it. There are no studies on it. What do you mean? Like,
right.
But yeah, I find that incredibly frustrating about the medicalization. That's why I kind of turned away from all that. It's like, if you're an adult, take the hormones, provided you don't have a condition that could make that worse, like you get a heart attack from estrogen or cancer or something, right? But like, other than that, if you're an adult, you absolutely should just be able to do it. And it's up to you how you handle the society surrounding like your choice to do that.
Yeah. And I think doing it should come with, just so you know, you may never get the aesthetic outcome that you want.
Yeah.
Just so you know, there might be completely unforeseen medical reactions, you know, just so you know, this doesn't make you the opposite sex. Like, I think like, yeah, for the framework that I would like to see implemented, we need to like radically change the view that clinicians even have about trans. I mean, it is captured, like the clinicians on down, this area of care is totally captured, ideologically captured.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. And yeah, you're right. You're right about Brianna. If it's not exactly like my story, then it's not valid. And she does do that with FTM, but with MTFs too. She'll talk about, and now there's this cohort of autistic. That's just so funny. Like, what, Brianna, you can't relate to autistic people. They're just nothing like me and the girls, you know, like.
Again, in my superhero figurines and my video game programming and
That picture of her with the figurines just gets me every time. It's just like, that's what my partner like would collects. It's like he likes doing Warhammer minis and stuff like that, which is, that's great, you know. It's like, but that it's just like, dude, like Brianna.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean,
I kind of love you, so.
Well, it's funny too because you could say that is male brained, which is something that trans people love to throw at each other as insults. Female brained and male brained. I've noticed this, and it's so funny because Brianna would be horrified to hear us talking about how her Porsche collection and her minifigurines and all this is very male brained, but she talks about how female brained the FTMs that she doesn't like are. Like she does this all the time too.
Yeah, it's funny.
The trans on trans violence is never disappointing.
I live for it. It. It's amazing.
I hope it's clear when I say that other FTMs are femme-brained. I'm not insulting them. I'm just pointing to the reality here.
Stigmatizing feminine and masculine traits is stupid. Like there's pros and cons to each, you know. Like femme brain gives you some benefits, and male brain does too, you know. So
exactly, yeah,
like,
pro-social, pretty femme-brained. You know,
almost like we need males and females.
Almost
for ours
crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. No, get rid of all the men, kill them all.
Yeah.
Only yin.
We'll leave all women and kill all men. Perfect. The conversation. Awesome. Thank you so much.
This was great. Yeah, I had a great time.
Cool.
Awesome.
So we will put this out this weekend, and we'll be in touch. Thanks for coming on and talking to us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I had a great time. So
good.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Take it easy.
All right.